What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Richard on Data. Now, if this is your first time here, my name is Richard, and this is the channel where we talk about all things data, data science, statistics, and programming. So subscribe for all kinds of content just like this if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so YouTube notifies you whenever I upload a video. So I'm seeing this thread popping up every now and then on Reddit, as well as on places like Medium. And it's all about, is data science boring? So I thought this would be an interesting one to talk about because for a lot of people, that's probably not going to jive with a lot of the things you've been told about data science. Everybody hypes up all the pretty amazing visualizations you can do, the cool machine learning models that get really hyped up and stressed in academic environments. And everybody knows Harvard Business Review, they've called data scientists the sexiest job of the 21st century. So it's probably worth looking at these perspectives about data science being boring and figuring out if there's any there or any things that practical people can take away from this. So we're going to go through 2 different Reddit posts as well as 3 different articles that have been written on this topic. Before we get into that, some usual asks I have for all you guys. Again, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, smash the like button to this video because that really does help my content reach a larger audience. Also, I do have a link in the description of this video to my Patreon account, so if you guys would be willing to support me that way, that would be enormously appreciated. And naturally, all of these articles and Reddit threads that I'm going to be going over in this video will be in the description as well. I'm not going to go through every little piece of them, but you can read and pick up the pieces there on your own time. Alright, so this thread, this was from 2 months ago, and it's from the user xbomber88, and he says, I'm 5 years into my data science career and at my 3rd job, and I just find it incredibly boring and tedious, and I'm thinking of leaving the field and moving into a software engineering role just to do something new. I found it interesting in the beginning when I was learning new things, but now it seems like pretty much 95% of all data science work falls into moving data around, cleaning data, build a model by calling some outside machine learning library. Yeah, that's relatively accurate so far, at least to a certain extent. Or trying to explain things to business people. I imagine there are some data science jobs out there where the work is interesting, but they seem incredibly rare. Have I just gotten unlucky in the jobs I've had? Or do other people who've been in the field for a while feel the same way as me? So right off the bat, that's a fairly comprehensive overview of what data science does typically tend to entail. I mean, oftentimes you're going to begin from unstructured or just generally dirty data, and then a certain part of your job is going to include cleaning all that up. Yes, you're going to have building models in there, but it's interesting because a lot of people really hype up that side of the work. But then this person's acknowledging they do that. I mean, they're using machine learning libraries, so I guess they're not necessarily building these things from scratch, but they're still commenting on how the work is boring. And you'd actually be surprised. There are a lot of perspectives I've heard out there that people who literally spend all of their time in the machine learning universe, it actually becomes the most boring thing ever. Like you start to go down that road for long enough, and then you legitimately miss cleaning data, believe it or not. So that's interesting. The top comment here is, I think a lot of it depends on what you find entertaining. If it's more technical, under the hood, cutting edge work, then yes, those jobs are going to be rare and are regularly going to go to those who are incredibly talented and experienced. Now see, that's an interesting point, because just in the data science pipeline, there's certain work like the cleaning data and stuff, which most people agree that stuff isn't necessarily fun. But you also have the machine learning type work, which a lot of other people really want to do. So suppose you had this dream, ideal scenario where you literally spent all of your time in the machine learning world. Again, that would, for a lot of people, that would probably get boring after a while. But just say that was your life. That could only happen at the expense of somebody else who's doing nothing but boring work all the time. And I mean, with the exception of like, interns who are in school and they're lucky to get out and get a job and they're happy to be doing whatever, people don't want to spend their entire time doing boring work. So everybody's kind of got to, pick up a piece at everything, at least I think in the overwhelming majority of scenarios. So they also say, if you're just looking for something different, what has helped me avoid that funk in my career has been to move industries and get more involved on the domain knowledge side of things. So more on that in a little bit. I think that's a super good point. And more on that in this other thread because it's very, very similar. So this person says, I've been a data, and this is from Adai-Skeed. This was 2 years ago. They say, I've been a data scientist for roughly 1.5 years. Don't really look forward to the day-to-day work. I feel like I'm constantly troubleshooting code, searching for data, and making visualizations. Spending all day staring at a computer screen and getting frustrated with code wears me down. Then they ask, will it get better as I get more senior, have more meetings, manage others? Has anyone switched out of a data scientist role for something they enjoyed more? So again, it's a fairly similar overview of what the actual work is. I noticed they don't mention anything with machine learning, but they do mention visualizations, which I'd say most people really enjoy, or at least get into data science thinking that's going to be a part of their work, and they really enjoy that side of it. Now, this person says that's the nature of the work, and certainly it can get boring at times. A big determinant is whether you care about the questions you're answering. If you do, then it's less of a pain to investigate them. And at least for me, I have a great love of the coding side of my work, even at times when I have zero interest in its ultimate utility. So, I think, and I agree with both of these comments, I think ultimately they're saying very, very similar things. They're both stressing that a lot of it comes down to your domain, and maybe just more so than your actual domain, but the actual place where you're working. Because on one level, just speaking personally here, since I've been out of school, my data science work has been in healthcare and pharma. Just because the notion of, just to whatever extent possible, being able to affect patient care and patient outcomes, that's something that really excites me. Like if I hear down the road, like because of data science work I did, that it had a meaningful and tangible effect on somebody's health, guess what? I take that as a huge, satisfying win. Like that's one of those things, like I can go to sleep at night if I knew something like that happened, and I feel incredibly satisfied with myself. And same thing with the place that you work. Like you have to really care about it. Like just by comparison, I've known this about myself for a long time, that I have zero interest in the insurance industry. So it's why when in the past I've looked for data science jobs, I always completely ignored the insurance industry because I know even if I get that job and make really good money, I'm working in an industry I don't ultimately care about that much, and I would end up being completely miserable. And so you really do have to find some kind of domain and some kind of problems to solve that you're really interested in. Like if you're going into it just for the money, I mean that's frankly a one-way ticket to just burning yourself out. And I mean frankly, these people have pretty honest perspectives of what what data science work entails, and I'm not trying to disparage them or make fun of them or anything like that, because trust me, I get it. I've been there. I've been bored with work that I've done in the past. But at the end of the day, the work is what the work is. There's always going to be some kind of coding component to data science. There's always going to be some kind of statistical fundamentals that underlie it. You always have to understand the domain to a certain extent. And some jobs will probably include machine learning, others not. There's probably going to be visualization. There's always going to be communication with stakeholders. I mean, these are parts of what data science is. So if there's anything in there that, frankly, you hate or you're not interested in, data science is probably not for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's another example of, you just need to know what data science really is so that your expectations going into it are as aligned with reality as possible. Now we've got an article here. This is from the website tdwi.org about how do data scientists really feel about their work. And they pretty bluntly start this off saying being a data scientist isn't everything it's cracked up to be. It has its share of boring, repetitive tasks. And so they get into some details here, saying, according to a new survey, on average, data scientists spend more than half their time, that is 53%, doing stuff they don't dig, such as cleaning and organizing data for analysis. And then a report published this was back in 2017, I guess. Yeah, 2017, May 31st. But they found that nearly half, or 45%, of data scientists spend huge chunks of their time cleaning and organizing data for analysis, a task not coincidentally that a clear majority, that is 60%, say they enjoy least. So like I was saying earlier in that Reddit thread, it really is a tragedy of the commons type situation. That is, everybody wants to have clean data to work on, but nobody wants to actually clean the data. So, at the end of the day, you're not going to have people who spend their entire careers, 20, 30 years or whatever, just cleaning data for other people to do fun stuff. That's just not going to happen. The other thing I will say, like when I read this, the thought that was just going through my head was, when people say they spend about, 53% is right over half of their time doing stuff they don't dig, that honestly doesn't sound all that bad to me. Because if you think about it, think about your actual real life, right? You probably have to do a whole bunch of chores and things you don't necessarily enjoy doing. Like, you have to do your laundry, you have to clean the place that you live in, maybe you enjoy cooking. Some people don't enjoy that as much, but some do. You clean up after yourself after the fact. Not to get super philosophical on you, but you spend a lot of your life doing boring, repetitive things that aren't necessarily your favorite things to do. But when you get around to doing things that you really enjoy, there's almost something about the fact you don't always do those things that makes them more enjoyable. Actually, they close this off by saying, one last thing, data scientists really love the cleansed, qualified data they use to train their models. And they say data scientists were given a choice between 3 options: accidental deletion of their machine code and algorithms, accidental deletion of their training data, and accidental shattering of one of their femurs. It's painful sounding. So most respondents say they'd rather suffer loss of their algorithms than loss of data. However, 28% say they'd rather break a leg than lose their training data. So that's wonderful. But I remember I found myself thinking in one of my earlier roles where this data was it was a disaster. It was a complete mess, and the idea at the end was to build some kind of predictive model. I really found myself really looking forward to that model building side of things and just seeing how well this thing would predict and sharing that with other people. And the way I looked at it was that was going to be the reward to myself for that other work that I was doing. And now lastly, we have this 2-part article from the data scientist Ian Xiao. Part 1 of this is actually in Towards Data Science, and I found part 2 of it in KD Nuggets, actually. And these articles are pretty long, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Again, these articles are fantastic, so you can read them on your own time. But I'm going to overview just some big takeaways that he has. Ron Swanson face as we go along, that's obviously an important thing. But this guy kind of makes the argument that data science can be boring sometimes, and that's okay. So again, it all comes down to making sure your expectations are somewhat aligned with reality. He says, in short, when I say data science is boring, I mean the deflating feeling when one realizes the gap between the romanticized expectation and reality. That's pretty fair. Everybody's going to go through that feeling at some point or another, usually probably like a year or 2 into their first job. Then they say most young data scientists expect to spend most of the time tinkering with and building fancy ML models or presenting groundbreaking business insights with colorful visualizations. Sure, these are still part of the job. Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, these things excite people. These sell. These get people excited to, actually join industry. You can't sell people on, no, you're going to get data clean. But he talks in pretty, thorough detail here about how he spends the majority of his time, and he's speaking from somewhat of a leadership role here, so, take it for what it is. But he breaks down his time, or the time of his team, rather, and he describes it as 5 to 10% of the time is spent designing. The expectation is we implement ideas that can be featured in famous machine learning journals, yada, 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 maybe even win the next Nobel Prize. That would be really astounding. In the reality, we implement things that do the job well. We take photos of some nice whiteboard drawings that are worth framing for. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think most people, they'll end up going with solutions that are a lot simpler than what they expected going into it. I'm kind of disappointed for their picture here, or for the GIF here. They didn't use that one, picture of Charlie Kelly with the whiteboard behind him from the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, for those of you who know that show. But anyway, he talks about his coping mechanism is keep talking about the crazy ideas over drinks with friends outside of my domain. They can be brutally honest and rude, do the crazy and smart ideas as side projects, and it turns out most of the crazy ideas don't really work, or is just marginally better than the simple ideas. Exactly. And I like his point at the top about talking about the crazy ideas over drinks, because at the end of the day, if you really enjoy the people that you work with, your job, no matter what it is you're doing, whether it's data science or anything else, you're just going to enjoy it that much more. He describes his 20 to 70% of his time falling in the bucket of coding. The expectation is you spend most of the time developing and refining the ML component. Someone else will take care of the rest. No one wants to do things you don't want to do, and you to keep all the goodies to yourself. Like I've been saying, it's a tragedy of the commons type of situation. He talks about later, a lot of your time is spent in QA and debugging and fixing things. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's not something you necessarily expect when you're going into, any kind of job, if it's your first job. But yeah, that's all over the place, and there's not a lot you can do about that. And he talks about we just need to deal with the bad results and think of smarter ways to build better models. That's the expectation. In reality, out of the time we spend on QA or /debug /apply fixes, 70 to 90% are on traditional software issues. Usually we can achieve a good enough result fairly quickly after we build the end-to-end model training and validation pipeline. Then we often deprioritize modeling to focus on system issues. Yeah, so what he's really getting at is at a certain point, things like deploying a model, making it stable and scalable and all that good stuff, that's the perspective he's coming from here, versus the expectation I think a lot of people have that it's really in the weeds, in your Python or in your R, trying to tweak and get the model's performance as high as possible as you feed new data into it. Then you spend 10 to 50% of your time firefighting. That is things like external issues, like scope change, upstream system dependency, and client complaints. Internal team matters like annoying bug that takes much longer to solve than expected. Yeah, again, welcome to data science, and welcome to any kind of capacity that involves coding. That is invariably going to happen. Having an extra comma somewhere in a select statement in a SQL query, that's my personal favorite that always gets me. And my own ignorance, that's my personal favorite and the one that I tend to run into the most. But yeah, and he's got a really good point here from a project and time management standpoint, which is coping mechanism, multiply the timeline by 2 to 5 times to leave enough buffer room if it relates to deep technical things or cross-team activities. Yeah, I really couldn't agree with that any more strongly. Like, when you're inexperienced, you really have a tendency to underestimate how long things take. And it's another one of those instances where your expectations end up not matching what really happens. So it's just a real easy way, not necessarily to feel bored, but just to feel extremely frustrated. So I think you get the idea from some of these articles about just all the practical, real-world things that you run into in a data science job. So again, I think the big takeaways here are you really have to understand what data science truly entails. Like, at the end of the day, again, it's going to involve coding, and coding has frustrations that go with it. You solve these very little, minuscule type problems occasionally and fix these bugs, which are incredibly frustrating, but again, that is part of the job. But I think it's important to put things into a longer-term plan as well. Like, you have to think about where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years. And one of these Reddit threads touches on this, that a lot of people get more involved in their domain, and that ends up being a lot more rewarding for some people once they really go down that road. And some people just want to manage other people and, manage projects or manage other people, and that's a fine, completely, I think, standard trajectory that comes from a technical data science position. So it can be really helpful just to think about where do you see yourself in the future. And I realize I didn't go through the second part of the article here, but there is one important point to highlight here. He talks about that boring problems are good, but that it comes down to convincing your boss to buy into your ML ideas if you can recognize and articulate what the real problems are, and if you can justify why and how machine learning can solve it better. So that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. You are driving change and you're convincing people of things. And once you realize what a big part of the data science pipeline that is, and find that part of it to be rewarding, yeah, it turns out to be pretty awesome. Again, not every single piece of the job is going to be just super fun and exciting, but I think for a lot of people getting into it, as long as you do actually know what you're getting into, you're going to find enough there that's rewarding, and if you have a plan, it's not just going to be about the money. You'll want to do data science over an extended period of time. So I'll leave it there. That's about all I had to say on this thread. Hope you guys found this interesting, that there are some good perspectives here. And again, I'll leave the links to these articles in the description of this video. So again, if you found this video interesting or entertaining, again, smash the like button and also consider sharing this video. That way I get my perspectives and my videos out there to a larger audience. Then I'll see you all in the not-so-distant future. Until then, Richard, on data.